Well, Lane, we did it. We got 1,000 subscribers. What do you think about that?
Good.
Good.
Yay.
Good, yay. What should we do to celebrate?
Fix that?
You mean this?
Yeah.
And what should we do after we fix it?
I don't know.
Should we give it away to a lucky subscriber?
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's do that. Let's get this guy back on the bench, get it fixed up, and then we'll give some details about how you can win this. Stay tuned. All right, so here we have a nice little Macintosh LC II. So this guy doesn't work. I believe I tested it before, but let's just go ahead and give it some power. The fan is in rough shape, and there was no chime, and it's not putting out any video. But at least it's getting some power. All right. So, what we're going to do today is recap the system board. I've got from DigiKey all of the capacitors that I need. So we've got 47 microfarad, 1 microfarad, 100 microfarad, and 10 microfarad. Now I'm using a mix of tantalums and electrolytics, just because that's what I happen to have on hand. I don't think I have any tantalum 47 volts, but that's no problem. And then thanks to Bruce Rain at Recap-A-Mac in Australia, we've got a recapping guide. So these make it really easy to take everything off and not try to have to worry about where things need to go back on. So everything's clearly labeled. And this is an LC2 board, so this will be really easy. And then we're also going to be recapping the Aztec power supply that's in this machine. So we've got the recapping package from Console 5. So Console 5 makes things easy because you can just order the one thing you need and it sends everything you would need to do that job. And they have system boards, power supplies, gaming consoles. Not sponsored, by the way, but just makes life easier. You can go on DigiKey and buy these exact same things and save a few bucks, or you can save yourself the trouble of trying to figure it all out and just buy the package. Since I have lots of LC, LC2, LC3 machines that need to be recapped, I just buy them in bulk and just do those, but got that. All right, so let's go ahead and get this guy apart so we can start the recapping work. You can see here I've already removed the hard drive. Don't worry, I've got the SCSI cable over here for it, so no worries. I've taken the battery out, and obviously I knew this was an Aztec supply, so I have been in here before. And this one also happens to have a kind of dusty Ethernet card in it. Let's put that off to the side. So the fan here, as we heard, is in need of either replacement or some work. I think we can drop some oil into here and make this fan okay again. We'll disconnect the speaker. And this one has the video RAM sim, as well as 2 slimline sims in here as well. I presume this is taking it up to probably 10 megabytes. Disconnect the floppy here. And we'll take the power supply out. So we're going to be recapping the power supply, and then we're going to be recapping this board here as well. So to take these boards out, there's just 2 tabs, one on each side. Let's kind of pull those back, and the whole board should slide away from the back of the case, unless it's thoroughly rusted in, but I don't think this one looks too rusty. And then it should just lift straight out. And there we go. So we can set this off to the side now. And this board is very dusty, but in pretty good shape, I would say, otherwise than being dusty. A little bit of rust on the SCSI connector, but that's probably normal. I don't see anything really wrong with this board, so I think this is an excellent candidate for recapping. So we'll go ahead and get all these caps off after we clean it up a little bit. can see that there are signs of cap leakage. So we'll use some 99% isopropyl alcohol. Just kind of sprinkle that on there. And this bottle is just about out. And we'll just kind of give that area a quick clean with this paintbrush. And we'll want to clean the whole board later, of course, but for now, just a quick and dirty clean, just so we can more easily remove these caps. Now, there's really two ways you can go about removing these caps, and I've done, I think, a short about that, so if you wanted to look that up, feel free. But the two ways are the twist method and the desolder method. Now, with caps that haven't failed completely, I wouldn't recommend using the twist method because that can pull the pads up, it can pull traces up. But with these capacitors that have all likely failed and leaked, I found the twist method works really well. So I just like to grab it on the sides and just give it some gentle twisting motion back and forth, and that pops right off and leaves the pads intact. Now, I'm never pulling up on it because I don't want to put upward pressure on the pads. So just twisting it back and forth until it breaks free of the legs. And never too much in one direction in one turn. You got to slowly work your way to get to a larger direction. So I got those two off, no problem. Yeah, and these pads have all, or not these pads, these capacitors have all leaked. You can see the gunk underneath them. All right, so those are those three, and then we have a whole bunch over here we need to pull up, including these little tiny guys. So again, some people will tell you that you should never use the twist method. It's too dangerous for the pads. Have I ever pulled up a pad using the twist method? Well, to be honest, I have. And that's really before I kind of narrowed in my approach to doing it, where I would be twisting and pulling up, or I would twist too far in one direction too early. Since improving my approach where I just twist slowly back and forth, never pulling up, I have not pulled up a pad from these boards doing that. Now again, I would not do this on capacitors that haven't failed, because the legs aren't going to pull out of those as easily. So again, this is just for these vintage boards that have leaked capacitors. All right, so let me finish these up. Let's fast forward and then we'll get to the good part. All right, so that's the bulk of all the capacitors removed. So now we need to clean up the pads. So the pads still have remnants of the legs on them. They have old solder, and we need to get that stuff cleaned off. So I'm going to turn on my soldering iron here. Let that get warmed up. So we'll be using ample amounts of flux today. Now we shouldn't have to apply any new solder to this. Sometimes with old solder that's corroded, you do need to apply fresh solder in order to get it to melt properly. Corroded solder just doesn't melt, but I think what I found with these LC style machines is that that's typically not necessary. And then in addition to that, we'll also be using the Super Wick cleaning braid. This is something that Adrian Black from Adrian's Digital Basement had recommended. I've used other solder wicks before and they work okay. I mean, they all kind of work, but he said this one really works, and so I bought some, and he is 100% correct. This stuff works really well. So let me move the camera down and we'll get a closer shot of this operation. All right, well, hopefully this funky angle works out. So we've got all these different pads here. I'm just going to go ahead and hit them all with flux. And really, when it comes to flux, there's no such thing as too much. But I'm going to go a little easy because it's always easier to add more later if I need it. All right. So hopefully my soldering iron is up to temp. And we'll just start here and see if we can't get these pads to get a little bit cleaner for us. All right, so that one is good. There's the leg from the old one there. Just gonna scrape that off with my tweezers. So what I found is that you can use the soldering braid as a bit of an abrasive to try to clean up the pads a little bit, but you want to be careful. You don't want to scratch them too much or put too much pressure on them, because that can cause them to pull away from the board. But a little bit of rubbing back and forth does seem to get them nice and clean. And then you can see on the solder braid here, the leg from that one has adhered right to it. So that makes it easier than trying to pull these legs up one at a time. So I go through solder braid pretty quickly. I know a lot of people really use it and or overuse it, but I like to always have fresh stuff as often as possible. So I'm kind of wasteful, I suppose, in that regard. So there's the leg that popped off there and the leg that popped off there. Now neither of those stuck to the solder braid, but we got them there in the end. And one thing you'll note about recapping these old caps, if you do it yourself, is that the easiest way to tell a capacitor is leaked is when you get them hot with the soldering iron. They have this really fishy smell, and I'm definitely getting wafts of that here up in my nose as I'm taking these off. So as suspected, they all probably have leaked. So that leg is just kind of hanging out there. We'll just flick that off to the side. All right. So these pads are cleaning up very nicely. Just trying to get the legs to stick. The other thing is you don't want too many of those legs hanging around on your workbench, because they can stick to your board and short something out eventually. So keeping them off your bench is typically a really good idea. And again, with the desolder method of removing caps, you don't have to typically worry about the legs being left behind because you've pulled it all up at once. But with the twist method, the legs are still soldered to the pads, so you do have to get those off. But as you can see, it's not really a huge deal. I think that's been a pretty good example. So we'll just fast forward to the next phase here. All right, so as you can see, all these pads are nicely cleaned. Everything's looking very good. We didn't pull any pads up, including the 3 over here. So really pretty simple. And now the next step will be to tin the pads to prepare them for the new capacitors. All right, so tinning the pads, again, I'm gonna hit them with some more flux. The flux will help the solder flow. And I'll get the 3 over on the other side of the board as well. So I'm going to use some 60-40 solder here. And then I'm just going to heat up the pad and touch some solder to it. Not too much, just a little bit. If you put too much on, it's too hard to get the capacitor to lie flat once you are trying to put that on. But you definitely want the whole pad to be covered. And ideally no bumps. All right, I think, oh, missed this one here. All right, I think that's all of them. So now we have that nice, fresh, shiny solder on there, and I'll get the 3 over here on the other side that are off screen. So that's the pads all tinned. So next we're gonna go ahead and start installing the new capacitors. So again, I got the 1 microfarad, 50 volt, and it's got 10% tolerance, but not even a problem. Pretty normal, I think, up to 20% tolerance. All right, so Console 5 is very nice that when you buy things from them, they send you this little cheat sheet to tell you which way capacitors need to go. So there's a band on tantalums and there's a band on electrolytics, and they mean the exact opposite. So on tantalum caps, the band is positive. On electrolytics, the band is negative. Now this board is very nicely labeled which side is which. You can see that there is a plus on all of the capacitors here. So here's the plus, and here's the plus, and here's the plus, and here's the plus. So you don't have to remember where they are for these boards. Some boards aren't marked clearly. So I always think it's good to take a picture before you work on things, but thanks again to Bruce and recapandmac.com.au. Not super necessary because he's got pictures and the board's labeled, so we don't really have to worry about it too much. All right, so this one is the 1 microfarad 50 volt, and this goes up here on this C22 position. So I'm just going to hold it in place with tweezers, melt the one side down. I think I melted the one side a little too far over, so let's just slide that back. All right. Then we'll melt the other side down. What I like to do is kind of just push on it to get it as flat as possible. Oh, and there's a leg still stuck to my soldering iron. I'll get that off. All right. So then I like to just do a wiggle test, make sure it's on there, make sure both sides are on. Then when you do a wiggle test, you want to be careful because if one side isn't connected, you could just wiggle the other pad that is soldered on right off, and then you have to worry about bodge wires, and it's a pain. So gentle with the wiggles. This one seems like it's on there pretty good. Now this side is up a little more than I'd like, but just due to the size of this tantalum and the space we have, it's gonna be a little tricky to get everything nice and flush. So just gonna leave it. It won't cause any harm. It's electrically connected, and the extra few microns of distance that it has isn't gonna change anything. So no worries there. All right, so the one here at the end of the slot is a 10 microfarad 16 volt. So that's these ones, 10 microfarad 16 volts, and these ones have a tolerance of 10% as well. I think we need a couple of these, so I'm just going to leave them out. And as you can see, these ones are much smaller, so it's much easier to get these ones into place and much easier to lose them. All right, so the polarity of this one is actually switched from the first capacitor. So positive on this one, which is the band, is up here. Positive on this one is the other side. So we want to make sure that we're putting this one on the correct way. Now you might ask, what happens if you put a capacitor on backwards? Well, probably what would happen is it would explode. Maybe not. It might just short something out and cause the power supply to not power up. But it also could explode. It depends on how much power is going through it. All right. So I'll give this one a little nudge down. And we'll give it a wiggle test. Yeah, this one seems like it's on there nice and solid. All right. So let's do the next 10 microfarad. It looks like almost all of these are, except for there's 247s and a 100 microfarad. So maybe I'll actually come back to these and do them all in a row, and I'll do the 100 microfarad next. So this one, 100 microfarad, 6.3 volts, which is what it calls for. And this one has 20% tolerance, which is, again, normal, nothing to worry about. I think if you use an ESR meter and test these, I have one here. I mean, we could test one out, but I don't think you're ever going to find one with 20% difference from what it's supposed to be. I mean, I think that's just the manufacturing tolerance, but it seems like they're really good at not actually getting that far off from what they're claiming the values to be. All right, so this is the 100 microfarad. This one's gonna go right behind the audio jacks right here. So in this case, plus is facing the camera. So this will be going about like so. So this is probably the trickiest capacitor to do on this board since it's so close to the audio jacks, and those are plastic. You definitely don't want to melt them, so be really careful. And we'll give it a wiggle test, and yeah, it's good too. So it's a little crooked, but no worries. It's electrically connected, and everything's going to be fine with it. All right, and then we do have two 47 microfarad 16 volt capacitors to install here. And as noted, these ones are the electrolytic type, 47 16 volt 20%. If I had tantalums on hand, I would use them. It's kind of nice to match everything up, but again, it's not necessarily a requirement. You can mix and match. People will probably tell you that it's a terrible idea and you shouldn't do it, but I've definitely done it before and have not had any problems. The real problem with using electrolytic capacitors is that in another 30, 35 years, they're probably going to leak too. Who knows? But for today, and for the next 30 years, they should be just fine. So now remember that with the electrolytics, the stripe is negative, not positive, like with the tantalum. So we'll do capacitor 133 here. Positive is going away from us. All right, and we give that one a bit of a wiggle test. And it was not properly soldered on. So we'll just try it again. All right, I think that should be good. I'll give that one the wiggle test. Yep, not going anywhere. I'm just gonna hit it with a little bit more solder. Since it is a bigger capacitor, we don't want it to float away. So we'll make sure it's really connected in pretty well here. All right. And then we have one more electrolytic to install. This is going to be capacitor 19. Positive is facing towards us again. So we'll spin it around and point negative away from us. All right, that one seems to be on there nice and solidly, so we'll give it a little bit of extra solder as well. Just to make sure. All right, now on this section of the board, everything else is going to be the 10 microfarad 16 volts. So I'm just gonna go ahead and do those. You've kind of seen the process now. And there we go. That's our board recapped. So now we need to move on to the power supply. let's get this board out of here, get the power supply in here, and take a crack at that. All right, so next we have this Aztec power supply to take apart. And to recap, so we'll take this screw out, and we will take this screw out. And I think that's all the screws we need to take out. So now, oh, there's one on the end here as well. Okay, so now I think we just need to separate the pieces here. Right, so the bottom plate just comes off. And then inside we have the board. Wait, no, there's a screw here on the end. So I think that is it. So now the switch and the connection for power are stay connected, and we'll just kind of leverage the board out, and then we can work on it this way, just leaving those connected because they're soldered in, and getting those things in and out is a pain. So no worries there. All right, I did recently have this thing turned on, and there's a very big capacitor in it, and I don't want that to go through my body, so I'm going to short that out. See if we can hear a little tick or if it's actually bled off. Yeah, nothing there, so there must be a bleeder resistor somewhere between those planes, allowing that to discharge slowly. Yeah, I definitely didn't hear anything, so I don't think there's going to be any voltage there, which is good, because that is a very large capacitor. All right, now, if we turn this way, thanks to Steve at Mac84, we have a replacement guide for this one as well. Let me just pull this up a little bit here. So this should look pretty much the same, and it sure does seem like it's the same to me, so that's good. We'll check the values when I pull these things out too to make sure that they're the correct ones. Steve notes that these capacitors here he recommends replacing, and these ones probably don't need to be replaced. This 180 microfarad and 47 microfarad. So that's this one here, and the big one he doesn't want to replace. We'll replace them both because we have them. They're part of this kit, so we'll just go through and do everything. So I think first thing to do is to, well, let's start with the big one, since it's easy to find where those pins are. So as always, flux it up. So let's just see how this goes with the solder wick. We might need to add some fresh solder in this case because these are big ones and one of them might be in a ground plane, but we'll just try it without first. Sure looks like that came pretty clean on its own there. So this one probably is the ground side because it's not taking the solder up as easily there, but it was some more flux. Taking the solder out of this one, Lane.
What do you mean?
Solder is what connects these big components to the board.
Did you need that then?
We're gonna replace it
How?
with this one. We got a whole bunch of stuff. So that one's not coming up super easy. That one needs some more too. So what I'm gonna do is add a little bit more solder to it. Add a little, careful, it's hot. Add a little fresh solder to it. That should help us get all the solder out. I don't think the other capacitors are going to be as bad as this one. This one's just really big. Cut off another piece of solder braid here. Oops. And we'll use some flux. Spark flux. Flux helps the solder flow.
So you're trying to burn it off?
Nope, trying to melt it and get it to go into this piece of copper braided wire. So we got to heat up this whole thing so it's nice and hot. All right, we can see the solder flowing out of there very nicely. We'll go over to this one, do the same. And we'll hit it with a little bit more flux. See if I can't get the rest of that solder out of there. Alright, so now this capacitor is probably pretty loose. Yep, and just pops right out. So luckily the board shows us which is positive and negative, plus we have the picture showing positive and negative, so we don't need to track that, but we want to make sure we install the replacements in the correct position. So I'm going to go ahead and pull all of these out. And this is the other one Steve said we didn't need to replace, but I'm going to replace it anyway because we likely have the things we need. Now what I'm going to do is open up this bag of Aztec capacitors. So again, let me pull the card back out. For electrolytic capacitors, polarity band is negative. And you can see that it's got the negative mark on it as well. So let's start by installing this big one here. So I'll solder that one in right away because it's got short little legs. We don't want it to fall out. And I think there's enough residual flux here. There's also flux in the solder itself. It's rosin core solder, so it does contain flux. But we want to put a lot of solder in this because this is a big component. We want to make sure it does not rip itself out of this board ever. All right, so that looks good. So now back to this side. So this 4725 volts goes into the one next to this big one. And the board is labeled positive up, so I'm gonna put the stripe down, push it in, and then bend the legs to hold it in place. So I'm gonna repopulate the board and then we'll solder them all in. It'll be easy. So I've got my 1000 microfarad 10 volt here, and that's gonna be going in this spot, and positive is there. So we'll put the stripe away from that. Put that in, bend the legs. Next we have 2200 10 volt, and that's going to be these two here and here. So positive's up, so we'll put the negative down on this one. Push that in, bend the legs, Here's the other 2200 10 volt. And on this one, positive is up. So we'll put the stripe down again. Bend the legs. Then right in the middle is 1200 16 volts, which is this one. So positive is down, so we'll put the stripe up. And it's got short legs, so maybe we'll just solder those in right away. Yeah, let's do that so we don't lose it. So I'll just kind of tack it in. We'll come back and fully solder it in later. So I'll grab some solder on the tip of my iron. And just kind of put a little dab on each leg here, and that'll hold it in. And then we've got 470, 25 volts. So this is actually calling for a 16 volt capacitor, not a 25 volt, but that's no problem. You can go over a little bit without any sort of issue. And so positive is on the bottom, so we'll put the stripe up. Stick that in, bend the legs. I should like to reposition this other one here a little bit. Okay, looks good. So this one here, positive is up. These are little guys. I probably should have done them first. Well, luckily it fits. So we'll do the same thing here. And sorry you can't quite see it, but I'm just gonna hold the capacitor here with my thumb and then hit each leg with just a little bit of solder to kind of tack it in place for now. And then we'll take this other one, and positive is up on this one as well, so we'll go stripe down. All right. So now we can fully solder everything in. We'll start with the ones I just tacked on. Make sure that they get plenty of solder. All right, and then we can do these newer capacitors here. Looks good to me. So now we'll just snip all these legs off with side cutters. All right, so that is our power supply recapped. So that should just slide back into here then. Now, you shouldn't probably run these power supplies without load, but I want to see if any of these capacitors explode. So I'm gonna go ahead and plug it in and turn it on and see what happens. Just really brief power on. Shouldn't hurt anything. Now, if you're gonna do this, be super careful because there is gonna be high voltage in here and it's all exposed, it's not protected. So let's plug it in and let's hit the switch and see what happens. All right, nothing exploded. So that was under no load, and these guys don't like to run under no load, but just for a quick test, you can. Now, of course, everything in here is potentially energized, especially that big capacitor, so we need to be careful if we were gonna take it apart and troubleshoot anything, but we're just gonna put it back together, so it shouldn't be a problem. All right, and that's our power supply recapped. So next up is the fan. This thing was making some bad noises. Now, this is a standard fan, brushless. What we can do with these fans is, if you carefully peel the label away, what you will see here is there's a hub in the middle. And what we can do is add a little bit of lubricant to that, and that should take care of things. I'm gonna use some deoxide here, which is actually a lubricant because I have it handy. But case oil is pretty good to put in these things, and you don't need very much. But we'll then get that deoxide off of here as much as we can, and then just reseal it. All right. So if that doesn't fix it, we'll come back with something else, but I think that's got a good shot of taking care of the fan noise. All right, so we'll reinstall the system board first. Install it the correct way. So it just kind of sits through these pegs and slides back in. All right, and then we can reinstall the power supply. Reconnect it. We'll reinstall the speaker. We'll reinstall our fan that is hopefully fixed. There we go. We'll leave the RAM out for now. We will install the video RAM. Alright, so let's go ahead and give it some power here. See if we hear a chime. We do, that's a good sign. And that fan is now 100 times quieter. Alright, so let's hook it up to some video. See if we get anything on video here. One of my VGA adapters. I think this is the right one for this kind of machine. Alright, well, I'm getting output on there. Let me move the camera so you can see. Alright, don't mind the streaks. That's just artifacts from converting to this monitor format or whatever. We can see the mouse cursor, so we should see flashing question mark here. That would indicate that we are ready to boot, but have no boot drive. And there it is. So we've recapped the logic board. We still need to clean up the extra flux and just generally give this thing a cleaning. We've recapped the power supply and we have fixed the fan. We made good progress so far, but we got a little bit more work to do. All right, so I got a lot of the gunk cleaned up. There's still a little bit of residue, a little more work to do there, but I got the board cleaned as well. I did boot off this external blue SCSI here just to take a look and see if we can get up into macOS, and we can. So we got 10 megs of RAM, which is maximum for these. They're crippled in the fact that that's the max RAM they support, even though you can put more RAM in them, they'll just end at 10. All right, so next we got to figure out the floppy drive situation and the internal hard drive situation. All right, so I was checking out the floppy drive in this one, and I see that there is the metal door from a floppy disk just wedged in here. That's not great. All right, so we've got a 40 meg hard drive in here. We've got a floppy drive, and we've tested both of these out. We're booted off the hard drive up into System Software 7.0, and we're able to read and copy and even eject floppies. So I think we're good to go here. So unfortunately, I could not get this network card to work. I don't know if it's bad or if I just don't have the drivers or I don't have the correct device to connect it to. I tried it on my gigabit switch, which typically does work with these older network cards. No luck there. I tried it with this 10100 Wi-Fi router. No luck there either. So I think the card probably is no good, unfortunately. So we'll just yank that out. We'll give this Macintosh LC II that you've just seen us repair, we'll give it away to one lucky subscriber. So make sure you're subscribed, and we will do a drawing in 1 week. That'll be May 13th, right? Yeah, it'll be May 13th. All right, so check it out on May 13th. We'll do some fair drawing of all the subscribers, and we'll make sure that it's not biased. For your chance to win this Macintosh LC II system, keyboard, mouse, and 12-inch RGB monitor are included. You just need to be subscribed to my channel by midnight on May 12th. If you are in the lower 48 U.S. states, I will pay for shipping to you. If you are outside of those contiguous lower 48 U.S. states, you'll be responsible for shipping. If the first place winner doesn't accept the prize, I will continue to draw names until we do find a winner. Good luck.
Thanks for watching.
See you soon.
Hi guys! Make sure to like and subscribe and watch more of our videos later. Bye!